Tonight's NBA draft lottery could redefine the Pelicans' future, but one thing seems certain. Zion Williamson is set to return, potentially alongside a new star in Cooper Flagg. Plus, I've got draft expert Richard Stayman to tell you just how good this draft class is. It's Locked On Pelicans. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans and NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available wherever you get your podcasts and available on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. Here with y'all on this Monday, it is lottery day, y'all. The Pelicans have a chance for the number one overall pick in what feels like a very pivotal moment for this franchise here. We're going to cover it all in today's show. I'm going to tell you what we want to see happen, how we want the lottery to unfold, not just getting the number one overall pick, but I'm going to kind of walk you through moment to moment of how the broadcast will work so you don't freak out unnecessarily, good or bad when it comes to it. We've got an update on Zion Williamson that's real big that I'll get to here first. And then I'm having Richard Stayman of Locked On NBA Big Board, NBA draft expert, going to break down this class a little bit more for us because I think we got a lot to cover when it comes to it. So we got a lot to cover in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's show is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. And of course, thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the number one Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this team. We've been covering the draft a bunch. We'll be covering the draft going forward, wherever the Pelicans end up falling. I will be live after the lottery. Basically, the second the lottery ends, no matter where the Pelicans fall, I will be live on Locked On Pelicans on YouTube. So be sure to join. By the time you're listening to this, watching this, you will see that up over at the Locked On Pelicans YouTube page. We will answer your questions, do a full live show after that. If you want to go join friends in person, by the way, don't forget about our friends over at the In the Know podcast. They're having a watch party over at Sports Drink, just off of Magazine on Toledano over there at 5:30. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Pelicans fans out in force right now. So let's get to the biggest news with the lottery before kind of breaking down the specifics of it here. And that is, it's being reported by Shamit Dua and Will Guillory that Zion Williamson will be representing the Pelicans on the broadcast, on the stage when they unveil the picks. There's always a representative of the team there. Zion Williamson is going to be doing that. Joe Dumars will be in the room where they do the actual like ping pong ball lottery. Look, if you want a clear confirmation that Zion Williamson is not being traded or that they want to continue to build around him, this is pretty much it. It would be a little wild to trot him out there, have him kind of show that he's connected to the team, part of the team, excited or disappointed with however the lottery results are going to go, and then look to try and trade him later. And maybe, look, that's true. Right? Like, I think this is the best way that they can get back into the playoffs next season by building around Zion Williamson. Joe Dumars at his introductory press conference said he wanted to talk to Zion. We've talked about it on the show a bunch, that they're going to need to kind of have one of those tough heart-to-heart conversations of you buying in, you doing the things. It sounds like those conversations between Joe Dumars and Zion Williamson have gone pretty well. So if you want them to keep Zion, this is the surest sign that, yeah, that's something that they're going to do. I will say this. You know, if you want to make it look like you're keeping him, that you're trying to drive up the value, you're not going to just let him go for cheap. This is also a way to do that as well. So it could be smoke signals. It could not be. I lean more on it not being. This is the surest sign that Zion Williamson is going to be back with the New Orleans Pelicans for next season. So let's move on into how we want to see the lottery go. So the way this works, to give you the most general overview, and you likely know by now, the lottery is only for the top 4 spots. It's not for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It's literally just for the top 4 spots. So a team that's, slotted 14th can't get 5. They can get 1, 2, 3, 4, or 14. Pretty much just that. So the way they do this is the lottery's done, and then they reveal the picks in reverse order. So they'll start with 14, 13, 12, 11, 10. Usually there's a commercial break in there. Then they go through the rest of them where you get to the fourth pick. They unveil the fourth pick. There's a commercial break. And then you get the unveiling for the top 3 picks in order. The Pelicans can fall anywhere from 1 to 8 in this draft. They have a very wide range of 1 to 8. So we're going to find out where they end up slotting. It's going to be important, and Richard's going to kind of break it down for us a little bit more in the next 2 segments of today's show. So how do we want this to go? Not just getting a 1, 2, 3, 4. What do we want to see happen if you're kind of living moment to moment? The way you want to see this go is it go chalk. You want to see every team, if you go to tankathon.com right now and look at 14, 13, 12, 10, 11, 10, I can count. You want to see all those teams pop out. If one of those teams doesn't pop out, it means they have jumped into the top 4. Now, if a team behind the Pelicans jumps into the top 4, it does not necessarily mean that the Pelicans are falling in the draft lottery. You know, you could have a team like Chicago at 12 end up with the 2nd pick, and the Pelicans could still get 1, 3, or 4. So if you see a team kind of get skipped, right? Say it comes out, San Antonio first, Atlanta second there, Chicago third, right? 14, 13, 12, Dallas at 11, and then you see Houston at 10, where that should be Portland. That means Portland has jumped up into the top 4. You have an idea that they've at least moved up. You don't know specifically where. It does not mean that the Pelicans are now 5th or something like that. It means that the Pelicans could easily still be in that top 4. So keep that in mind. You know, even if 2 teams kind of show that they've jumped up, the Pelicans can still be right up in there. Basically, when it comes to 8, 7, 6, 5, we do not want to see the Pelicans logo come up when they unveil those envelopes whatsoever. And we'll already have an idea if that's the case, you know, usually by that point. But at 8, we don't want to see New Orleans. 7, no New Orleans. 6, no New Orleans. 5, it's kind of, you know, likely that you could end up seeing them there. So that's kind of how we're expecting the moment-to-moment thing unfold. Just because a team is unveiled where they shouldn't be does not mean that it is a disaster yet for the New Orleans Pelicans. You could have the other 3 teams, Utah, Washington, Charlotte, all fall. New Orleans jump up along with 3 other teams. That'd honestly be kind of fun and pretty great here. So the Pelicans have a 12.5% chance of landing the number 1 overall pick for Cooper Flagg. They have a 48.1% chance of finishing in the top 4. That's pretty good overall. I'll tell you the exact odds for each pick. 12.5% for number 1, 12.2 for number 2, 11.9 for the 3rd overall pick, 11.5 for 4. They have a 7.2% chance for 5, a 25.7% chance for 6. That is their highest percentage for one individual pick, 16.7 for 7, and just a 2.2% chance at 8. It is still far more likely than not that the Pelicans will end up in the top 4 of this draft. So I'm not overly worried in the moment to moment and how this is going to go. And given that this is a pretty good draft overall, wherever you end up means they're going to be in a good position, whether it's to trade the pick, and we'll talk a little bit about that coming up, or to get another guy that can be a difference maker for this team. And if you're keeping Zion Williamson, while yes, we would like Cooper Flagg, I'd be very fine with number 2 and Dylan Harper there. But even 3, 4, 5, you're going to get the type of player that will fit right into a team that is still built to make the playoffs next season. And don't forget, we're going to be live after the lottery. The second it ends, I'm going to be live on YouTube, so come join me as we break down where the Pelicans land and what it looks like for each individual, the individual pick that they're going to have. Hopefully, we're going to be celebrating. If not, we'll figure it out, who they're more likely to draft, all of those things. It's going to be on the live show. You're not going to want to miss it. So coming up next, Richard Stayman of Locked On NBA Big Board is going to break down this draft with me. I got a lot of questions for him. This is going to be an interview you don't want to miss. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by DoorDash. NBA fans, you know what time it is. Playoff season means big performances and even bigger rewards, and DoorDash is bringing the heat with a slam dunk deal for Dash Pass members during the 2025 NBA playoffs. It's called They Swoosh, You Score. Anytime a player drops 50 or more points in a playoff game, Dash Pass members score a free 3-piece crispy tender combo from Wingstop the very next day. Just place an order of $20 or more, use code WINGSTOP50 at checkout, and that combo is yours. Crispy, delicious, and totally free. Offer valid noon to midnight the day after the game. Terms apply. Look, you ever use those apps and realize like your order is like triple what you thought because of all the fees and different things like that? There's a better way with DashPass. You get $0 delivery fees and exclusive perks like this one. Think about how much you could save each season if you were using DashPass for all your meals. So here's the play. Sign up for DashPass to unlock this and more exclusive deals all season long. When any player scores 50 or more in a playoff game, DashPass members can grab a free 3-piece crispy tender combo for Wingstop the next day with a $20 or more order. Code WINGSTOP50. That's DashPass, your door to more savings, more flavor, and more ways to win. Terms apply. And thank you for making it Locked On Pelicans your first listen. Today and every day, we're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube. And if you're an everydayer, let me know in the comments down below. So we just covered kind of the Pelicans lottery odds, how we want to see things unfold in the moment in the first segment. But now I'm joined by Rich Stayman of Locked On NBA Big Board here to help break down this draft. Rich, I appreciate you, man. I haven't had you on in a minute here, so I'm excited.
I know. It's good to be back. I love the show.
So, and look, it's hopefully going to be an exciting time here. But help me break down this draft a little bit. Can you give me like a high-level overview of how you look at this, how you've kind of viewed this through like a scouting lens, let's say?
Yeah, it's first of all, it's a great refresher after the draft last year. Last year was considered one of the weakest going into it, and at the end of the year, we agreed the evaluations on it were pretty spot on of it being a weak draft class. There's still going to be good players, of course, but generally the superstar power is very weak. This year it's different. We have Cooper Flagg at the top, Dylan Harper, and then you have anywhere between 10 and 15 guys that can make up the next tier of rankings, right? And in the tier after that, the drop-off is minimal. And honestly, so far, it looks like a pretty decently deep draft, but we're seeing a lot of how NIL impacts it. I think there's a lot of different guys that I've had in my top 30 that could easily go back to school because the NIL bags are that good.
No, so that's interesting to hear how that kind of like impacts it, I think, and that, you know, maybe it impacts people's like futures for it. One guy it's not impacting, and there was some talk of this depending on who would get the #1 overall pick, was Cooper Flagg, whether he should go back or not. My everydayers know I did a show breaking down his money over like a 10-year period, and he should definitely not go back to Duke. But he's, you know, not that I think anyone's debating this, but put this to bed. Like he is I view him as like tier 1 by himself. Is that the way you view him as a prospect?
Yeah, I'm the same way. Exact same way.
Let me ask you this. The way I kind of view it is like tier 1 guys are guys that could go #1 overall. And in this one, it's Cooper Flagg. Like what makes him so good? What makes him in a tier by himself?
Yeah, I mean, he was 17 for the first month of the year. That's pretty abnormal, while also putting up superstar numbers and being a player of the year candidate, right? So doing all of that at his age, he's 18 for the first 2 months of the season. He's also got an incredible history. If you'd seen him in high school, I've seen him a lot. He had 50-point games. It was the stuff he was doing in high school at the club level versus AAU. It was consistent everywhere. He was dominating last year. Everybody kind of heard about him at the USA practices. Everywhere he's gone, he's won with minimal talent. The team he won in the EYBL 16s, the only player that's even playing high major next year or this year that was on that team is Cooper Flagg. Nobody else is touching a high major floor unless they're getting, you know, their team's getting paid. Like I think Cooper's brother or twin brother, Ace, is playing at University of Maine, and he dragged them to the finals, and they barely lost to the Boozers, who are next year's, you know, big winners. And that's kind of where it's special is. That's the overview. But then you look at the game by itself. He's elite defensively, even though he doesn't have a great frame. He's not like super long, but he's very athletic, incredible timing on all of his contests. He can guard truly 1 through 5. And then on offense, he can pull up off the dribble. He can catch and shoot, finish. He can create for others. He's a very complete player, especially for being 18 years old and 6'8", 6'9".
Who's like the NBA comp for him?
I'm bad at comps. A lot of people say, you know, there's some Andre Karolinko, right? That like 6'9" do-it-all guy. Some Andre Iguodala even. I mean, to me, yeah, it's just one of those two. I think a lot of people say Karolinko because they're both white, but there is a lot of on defense. On defense, it's absolutely true. Offense, he's just a very complete player, and he's nothing like those two on the offensive end.
Yeah, he's well-rounded. Karolinko, by the way, is like second all-time or third all-time in 5x5 games, which is something like no one realizes, and how like only 19, 15 people, something like that, have one of those games in the NBA. He has 3. I know that stat off the top of my head. So you mentioned Dylan Harper too. Is he he sounds like he's your number 2 guy. Is he kind of in a tier by himself there too?
Yeah. There's really nobody else that's that close to him, in my opinion. He's another guy who I've seen for years. He's Ron Harper's son. You probably know Ron Harper Jr., who came through the rings. It's his younger brother. He has been since high school just another one of these guys that was ultra efficient. Was the number 1 player in the class before Cooper last year, and he's somebody that it's very complete game. The shot hasn't looked like statistically. There's some worries there that it may not be great. I don't think it's ever going to be bad. And because of that, I think he stays as a 6'5" floor general that can also contend on the defensive end.
Yeah, it seems like that's, if the Pelicans don't get number 1 overall, and that's obviously the hope, if you end up with the 2nd overall pick, Dylan Harper seems like the type of guy that's like just like a no-brainer pick for this team when it comes down to it, it feels like, right? So let me ask you this, like, given how you talked about how good this draft is, like, how important is it to land in the top 4 of this draft and like this lottery?
I would say top 2 is a big winner, right? Where it's getting Cooper or Dylan, it's a surefire thing. You're getting a potential franchise changer, at least somebody who's going to contribute to being in that core, very much so, not at the end of the core, but in the middle or top of the core. 3 and 4, things change. I don't think there's a true consensus around number 3. Everybody says Ace Bailey just because preseason he was seen as 2 or 3, and I think people are anchoring to that. The combine will change a lot, right? Measurements come out, things will change. Is he 6'8"? Is he 6'10"? There's a lot of differences. Is he Michael Porter Jr.? Can he ever actually dribble, right? Can he get to the rim? Is he Jabari Smith? There's a lot of different outcomes for him, and knowing how 2022 played out, where myself included, I was wrong on this. I had Jabari for number 1 for most of the cycle. You don't take that player that high. Even 3 probably seems a bit rich. So Ace may not be that. There's VJ Edgecombe, Trey Johnson's in that mix. There's just a lot of different players.
Yeah, it seems like after the top 2, it's just kind of wide open. So at least landing in the top 4 seems just like massive for New Orleans and what they want to do, which is likely going to be getting back into the playoffs next season with that. You mentioned Ace Bailey. I go back and forth on him, right? The size is there. A lot of the tools and the shot making can be really great. But like, I talked to someone around the Pelicans with this before the regime change and everything. And I was like, what's the fit between Zion Williamson and Ace Bailey? And it was like, they were like, I don't know if there is one, or we kind of saw it with Zion and Brandon Ingram. What's your like overall thoughts on him?
Yeah, I loved him in high school because I thought so much of the problems would go away with better talent around him, playing with Dylan Harper. And honestly, it didn't. Like my high school eval versus college eval is just so different. This is just a year and a half ago, I saw him in Florida in December 23. And my eval basically read as he's an ideal wing, right? 6'9", 6'10". He blocks a lot of jumpers. Like the instincts on defense are pretty good. He still needs to iron that out, but then also he can come off of screens. He can hit turnaround jumpers and just simply shoot over you like Kevin Durant does. Like truly, for a high schooler, it was very rare to see someone do it as polished as he did it. And now I'm looking at offense in college, and I'm like, he has zero handle, especially with the left hand. He cannot dribble against traffic and against contact. And then also he doesn't go to the rim. And those are hand in hand. And if you can't go to the rim as a wing, you might just be a spot up player. There's basically one player, and I think it's an overly simplified version of him, but there's really only one player who has made it work at a high level at his size, just based on shooting and shooting only. And it's really Michael Porter Jr. And even then I don't like that because it's actually an oversimplification given the role and context and everything like that, but it's the closest one you can find.
Yeah, he's going to be an interesting one. And that's why if the Pelicans end up 3 or 4, it kind of really opens the door in a lot of different directions. Whereas if they're in the top 2, like we kind of know who they're going to probably most likely going to be taking in that way. So I want to get into a couple of other prospects here, talk a little bit about trades and things like that with you. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by Monarch Money. You ever check your bank account and wonder, where'd all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, entertainment, it's really easy to lose track. And that's where Monarch Money comes in. It's your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. And Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you stop just managing your money and you start building wealth. It's going to give you some surprising insights. When I started using Monarch Money, I realized how many streaming services I had and how much that was costing me over the course of a year. I was able to cancel them, so now I can budget smarter and save even more. And instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. You buying a car, you're saving up for a home. Do you just have a big purchase you need right now? Let Monarch Money help you achieve that. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNBA for half off your first year. And today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by Hungry Root. Everyone in my house has always got things going on. It's just like the busy season when it comes to it. So I don't have a lot of time to do grocery shopping or to cook healthy meals at home. And that's why I use Hungry Root. Hungry Root is like having your own personal shopper and nutritionist wrapped up into one. They take care of grocery shopping and meal planning, offering personalized recommendations based on your tastes and health goals. I don't have time to do all of that. If someone can make it easier, especially easier to eat healthy, something that I think most people try and achieve here, don't make it harder than it needs to be. Use Hungry Root. Hungry Root is going to tailor your order based on what you like or don't like, and it gets smarter every single time. And with their high-quality, nutritious food, you can stick to your gut-friendly, high-protein diet, whatever it might be, without spending hours planning. And my favorite part, the meals come together in 15 minutes or less. You're not cooking for an hour, so you have more time for workouts, your family, playing video games, whatever it might be. Take advantage of this exclusive deal. Get 40% off your first box plus a free item in every box for life. Go to hungryroot.com/LockedOnNBA and use code LockedOnNBA. That's hungryroot.com/LockedOnNBA, code LockedOnNBA for 40% off and a lifetime free item. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen. Today and every day, we're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. Derek Carr just retired. What's going on there and how does it impact the Saints with surprising weekend news? Locked On Saints, you've got to make them your second listen today. Ross Jackson, who I saw over the weekend, breaking down everything black and gold over there and what it means for the Saints QB future. I'm joined right now, though, by Rich Stayman of Locked On NBA Big Board here, kind of breaking down this draft on lottery night. We'll find out where the Pelicans are picking in a little bit. I will be live as soon as the lottery ends here on the Locked On Pelicans YouTube channel. So, Rich, we've kind of gone through some of the guys. Can you give me a quick scouting report on VJ Edgecombe? Because he's someone that seems like he would be a natural fit, I think, with this Pelicans team.
Yeah, agreed. He's another one of these guys. The same time I saw Ace Bailey actually saw VJ at the same time as well in high school in 2023. And he is one of the guys where everything I think has translated very well. He's super athletic, and especially in the open court, but you get him in a numbers advantage or even get him a screen and he gets that downhill momentum. It's a lot of trouble for the defense in the paint because he can finish over through whatever it is at the rim, but also he makes really good reads as a ball handler. Like, I think there's a lot of true upside as a 2. And a lot of people just say 2 for scores and scores only, like Trey Johnson, who we may talk about later.
Yeah.
He is a true 2. He doesn't really pass that much, but I think VJ does the stuff that a 2 does, where it's, hey, at DeMar DeRozan, I think he's a great example of what a 2 is in the NBA, and VJ makes a lot of those same reads. I don't think he's as much of a playmaker, but he is somebody that makes a lot of those reads, plays really hard every single possession, and can play defense at a very high level, despite being probably 6'3" is what I guess he measures at. He'll have long arms, but the shot will get there. The shot did actually get there. And throughout the year, he started extremely slow. Defenders wouldn't even close out on him. By the end of the year, he was getting hard contests. He was making shots. And I know for a fact, like in the summer, he was killing it at Baylor, like shooting the ball. So it's just a matter of the results didn't catch up to the process.
Yeah, he's someone I'm very, very high on. I think you mentioned Trey Johnson. I'm lower on him. I think watching these NBA playoffs, you need guys to do multiple things well, and you're kind of seeing it. At least you're like kind of lead people. And to me, he's kind of that like go-to scorer on ball guy. Is he a good off ball guy too? Like, admittedly, I haven't watched a ton of him, but that's a way you can make your impact felt without the ball, which I think is something you're seeing needs to happen on a playoff contending team.
Yep. I agree, by the way. And yes, he does do that. Off-ball defense is definitely a strength. He's a very smart, cerebral player on both ends of the floor.
So a couple other guys I want to ask you about that I'm intrigued by and want your expertise here. I think Con Knipples feels like he's going to go in the top 8 of this draft out of Duke. What's his ceiling? That's what I've tried to kind of figure out, and I can't really figure out like what he's going to be. He's going to be a really good shooter. He moves well out without the ball, but like what else is he doing that kind of justifies like a top 5 pick potentially on him?
Yeah, I mean, crazy motor, right? Like I think he's somebody where also if he shoots 40%, like his value's really good. I don't think
significantly high.
Chance, yeah, I don't think, and I think the 40% is a real thing. By the way, I think it's attainable, very attainable. My thing is like by no means in nature is he somebody you think of like as a hound on defense in terms of like he locks you up, but he makes you work way harder. Like he will not be a liability on that end because he can push you off your spot without fouling, of course. I think as his body gets stronger and everything, he's somebody we're going to be talking about as a just shooter that can do everything else at a good level, but never really great. And I think if you're shooting 40% and doing that, you could probably start.
I mean, is that like a Trey Murphy kind of guy to you then a little bit, where Trey like shoots at a very elite level, but nothing else is like, oh, that's really, really good kind of thing?
Yeah, I think it's hard because like, he's probably only 6'4", 6'5".
Yeah, the height difference 6'9". Is significant.
But like play style, I think yes.
Oh, that's great. Who are some guys that you really like in this draft? Maybe ones we haven't mentioned so far.
Yeah, they're a little bit further down. I think someone like Yaxel Lendenberg is somebody who's going to climb in the scrimmages if he plays. You think about who the climbers are throughout the years, it's actually whoever kills it in the scrimmages. And also you're like, actually looking at his stats, he pops. And Yaxel's a guy, I need to double check this number before I completely, I want to make sure it's right because it is truly the most gaudy box score I think I've seen this year and maybe even further. And the conference tournament against East Carolina, the opening game of the American Athletic Conference, he missed a 5x5 by one block. He had 30 points, 20 rebounds, 8 assists, 5 steals, and 4 blocks with 0 turnovers on 9 of 16 shooting. So he's somebody where the advanced stats have popped all year. 6'9", two-way player. He can create. Also, the shot is growing. If he kills it at the scrimmages, he has a big bag at Michigan, I'm sure, lined up. He may forego that for potentially lottery pick.
Yeah, those guys that kind of rise into that where you're like getting real significant NBA money is probably like where you've got to be. Whereas if you're at the end of the first round, it's like, I'll go back to school for a year, get my bag, enjoy college, and then come back, I think, with all that. What about a guy like Kasparas Yakachonis? He's been a little, I think, polarizing. Same thing with Demon, right? Out of BYU, kind of as the two taller point guards there. I kind of lump them together a little bit, not necessarily if we're ranking them on like a big board, but kind of the questions about them a little bit, right?
Yeah, I'm very low on Yegor, to be honest. Being 6'8" roughly is pretty good, and he's a very good playmaker. The problem is, I would say most of his best games came against the worst competition. The first 4 games they played
early on,
low major regional schools, and he's not a shooter, and I don't think the defense is good enough to make up for it.
So when you evaluate guys, like, do you kind of, you're obviously looking at it from like game to game progression and things like that. Are you putting like a ton more emphasis on conference games where they've been able to be scouted by their opponents? And like when you see a jump in conference play stats, like that's an important thing to see?
100%. Because there's a few things. The reason why tournament upsets happen is, one, the time length between, right? You have almost 4 days, 5 days, depending on which day you play, or if you're in the first 4, to really be able to scout your opponent, right? So if you're, let's say Weber State, right? Let's just say they make the tournament, they get it in as 13, 14 seed. their preparation to play a game against the 3, whatever seed they're playing against, is so significant compared to what they have given the resources, the time, all that. Whereas they may have just played 2 days ago and now they're playing BYU. It's easier to walk all over them when they don't have enough time, enough resources to really prep for it in the regular season. So I think yes. And in the conference play, there's a set schedule generally. You sometimes have the bye, but the teams know who you are and they're just the resources that can go into it. Most of the time, especially in the high major ones, they know everything about you. So they're more easily able to stop you. So I definitely value that.
Yeah, and he struggled, I thought, in conference play. Like, just did not look that like what you would want to see from him, and not got worse, let's say, as the season went on, but didn't get better, and that's kind of concerning, in my opinion, when it comes to those guys. What about someone? I'm pretty high on Jeremiah Fears. What do you think about him going into the NBA?
Yeah, he's an interesting player because he's another guy who's very young. I think it's him and Cooper Flagg are the 2 youngest. I don't know, can't remember who turned 18 first, but I want to say Jeremiah maybe. And yeah, he's 18. He's 6'3", we'll call it, give or take an inch. The 2 concerns I have are finishing at the rim and shooting. I'm more confident in the finishing at the rim coming along because he's 18. His body isn't developed. He had to play against some 23, 24-year-olds. It's not going to look great. Like, the results on that aren't great. Look at the processes. There's still some stuff there where I think he's a little bit contact averse at times, but the shooting really has to get there. He shot below 30% from the year for 3. That's something that's got to improve. I think generally, yes, you should gamble on the upside. He's going to need the right fit, though, as well. He can't just be drafted to a team that has like 6-point guards. You know, he can't be drafted to a logjam.
No, that makes a ton of sense. So as we start to wrap up here, let me ask you this. You know, if, say, like, disaster strikes the Pelicans on lottery night and they end up like 7 or 8 in this draft here, is that kind of the range where you'd be like, maybe they should think about, and assuming they're keeping Zion, who's going to be representing them on the lottery stage of all the players, right? Is that where you're like, maybe they should try and trade that pick to get, say, another, call it like a solid starter. Maybe it's an upgrade at the center position, something like that. Or are you like, no, this draft is so good in that 7 to 8 range, like you've got to draft a guy?
Yeah, I'd say probably draft a guy. Especially, like, I mean, depending on what you're looking at, right? It depends on what they end up wanting. You can probably get everything there because I don't think you're going to find anybody who has the same. I mean, forget 3 through 10. Honestly, 7 through 15, 18, somewhere in that window, depending on withdrawals. I think that's a really deep range that it varies so much that you could probably get a steal there.
No, that's kind of good to know as we kind of like chart, you know, as the Pelicans are looking to try and like chart their course, right? Of, you know, maybe this is one of those drafts where you're like, yeah, someone falls to you there, or it's like, you've just got to take them knowing that they're going to develop and you don't want to overpay just to, I don't know, get bounced out of the first round or something like that in the postseason here. You have any predictions on how the lottery is going to go tonight?
I feel like it might be chalk. I feel like it goes. Just playing the numbers, I think we're on track for a chalky year. Maybe somebody crazy sneaks into like 3 or 4. I think Utah or Washington gets number 1. Charlotte or Washington or Utah, whoever doesn't get number 1 of those, will get number 2. And then I think it could get crazy. Maybe New Orleans jumps up to 3.
That'd work for me.
You know, you could have something like Portland going up to 4, right? Or I don't think I can say who I would love to see at 4, given the year they had, who they traded away, and who I've always been a fan of. So,
Rich here is formerly of Mavs Draft, by the way, should feel to point out. All right, one more before I let you go, because when you've done in the past, like your mock drafts and everything, this is one of my favorite features of that. You always ask people to put in 2 undrafted guys from, you know, you do a 2 round mock draft. Then you ask us to put in some undrafted guys. Who are some undrafted guys that you think are like end of the second round, potentially undrafted, to potentially keep an eye on?
Yeah, I really like Will Richard from Florida. And I'm not just saying that because my name's also Richard, but I really like him just as a 3-and-D guy. He's got a little bit stuff to iron out on the defensive end, but he was so impactful on the national championship team. And he's been for several years. Like, he is a very high-level shooter. He's a wing at 6. I'm interested to see his measurements, but, you know, 6'6", give or take. And again, he can play defense. He can generate activity. I think that kind of role really works, and he plays so hard. He wins on the boards. I think that is a very translatable kind of game, and I like him a lot as well. The other guy I would say is Jamel Telfort from Butler. He didn't get an invite to the Combine, G League Elite, nothing. Like, I was very shocked to see that. But he is somebody that may make everybody regret that. He's a big guard, about 6'6", 6'7". He's a really, really good shooter. He's worked on that a lot, grown a lot throughout his career. He has a good runner on defense. He can lock guys up. And also, back to offense, too, he can attack closeouts very well. Just sounds like somebody that you would want at that size. So I think he's going to be a guy where NBA teams and fans and alike go, how did we miss this guy?
Final thing before we get you out of here, Zion James. I just realized I'm wearing my Tulane shirt. Yes. I should have probably asked this earlier. How do you see him going?
I love Zion James, man. I don't know if you remember, but I've tweeted about him since
a lot.
2022. I think I saw him play against SMU, and I was like, why is there no buzz about this guy? And then lo and behold, it took a little bit, but he blew up. He's an interesting prospect because he's low usage, right? But he, at the same time, he does so many winning things. He plays defense. He's a bowling ball in the best possible ways, right? He can bully you to the spots. He gets to the rim. He can lock you up. And also he can hit the occasional three. I think just growing that vision and making it all consistent as a playmaker while making his shot consistent, that's the formula.
No, that's great. I dig it. He's got a lot of Tulane love down here in New Orleans with everything. So I'm happy to see him in the draft, even if the final year was at Duke, which was still really, really cool to see with him there. Rich, I appreciate you, man. Thanks for coming on with me today.
Thank you.
All right, that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Pelicans. Enjoy the draft lottery tonight. Don't forget, I will be live the second it ends on the Locked On Pelicans YouTube page. As always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter, and I'll be back with y'all a little bit later.